Texas, and in Fort Worth, which was sponsored by the city's Chamber of Commerce. Mrs. Kennedy arrived late, and the entire room rose and gave her a standing ovation. The president then remarked that she takes longer to get prepared in the morning, but that it is worth it. Then, later in the day, the president took off from Fort Worth and made the short flight to Dallas Love Field. There, he and Mrs. Kennedy, Texas Governor John Connally, and Mrs. Connally got into an automobile, a motorcade formed, and proceeded down the freeway, headed for the Trade Center where the president was to make a speech. At approximately 12:30 Dallas time, that would be 1:30 Eastern Standard Time, a bullet hit the president, we believe in the head. He suffered a wound at least in the right temple. Within 5 minutes, the motorcade had broken up and he was in the emergency room of Parkland Memorial Hospital in Dallas, Texas. Within 30 minutes of the time the bullet struck him, the President of the United States was dead. That, briefly, is the chronology of what happened today in Dallas, Texas, to the President of the United States. Now, further developments, further movements in this story come from the nation's capital. For those, we go to NBC's Ray Scherer in Washington.
I left the Capitol a few minutes ago to come here to the White House. As I left the Capitol, Senate Majority Leader Mansfield and Senate Minority Leader Dirksen were leaving the Capitol to go to Andrews Air Force Base by limousine to greet President Johnson. When President Johnson arrives at the airport, he will make a statement, which you will see on NBC television. He will then come to the White House, where he will hold his first meeting as president. He will meet with Secretary of Defense McNamara and McGeorge Bundy, the President's Special Assistant for National Security Affairs. They will brief the President on the world situation. At 8 o'clock tonight, President Johnson will meet with the leaders of Congress, presumably here in the White House. The funeral arrangements have just been announced inside here by Acting Press Secretary Andrew Hatcher. The President's body, the late President's body, will lie in repose in the East Room tomorrow. At 10 o'clock, the body will be viewed by the family. At 11 o'clock by Vice President Johnson, the Speaker of the House, and members of the executive branch of the Cabinet. At 2 o'clock by the Supreme Court. At 2:30 by members of the Senate and the House. At 5 o'clock by members of the Diplomatic Corps. Ray Scherer, NBC News, at the White House.
As we have attempted to sort out our thoughts here as this afternoon has worn on, it occurs to us that perhaps within the last month, certainly within the last 45 days, the actual chief executive or head of government of all of the major Western allies, save France, has been changed. Britain has changed prime ministers, with Harold Macmillan retiring because of illness to be replaced by the new prime minister, Sir Alec Douglas Hume. A new government has been formed in Italy. Chancellor Konrad Adenauer is no longer the head of the West German state. He has been replaced by Chancellor Erhard. And now the assassination of the President of the United States being replaced by the Vice President, now the President, Lyndon Baines Johnson. So 4 of the 5 major Western allies have undergone a change in their head of government within, as we say, about the last 45, perhaps 30 days, leaving only General Charles de Gaulle of France, who has long since been the last active figure brought over from World War II. The plane with the President Johnson and the late President Kennedy is on its way to Washington, will arrive at Andrews Air Force Base shortly. The new president is expected to make a short statement upon arrival. Lee Oswald, the prime suspect in the assassination, is under arrest, being questioned by police in Dallas. We have no late word on the progress of that. We are bringing you, as we are able to get the material prepared, the reaction from some of the world's capitals. And we have a report now from NBC's John Chancellor, who is in Berlin.
The news of the president's death swept across Berlin. The telephone exchange reported that it was swamped with calls and some of the equipment wouldn't work. As the news spread, people walked out into the streets on a cold and rainy night, asking one another if it was really true. In the restaurants along the Kurfürstendamm, the main street in West Berlin, customers gathered around radio and television sets. Most people watched for a while and then left their meals unfinished and just went home. At least one of the legitimate theaters in West Berlin stopped its performance in the middle, announced the tragic news, and canceled the evening's performance. A dance festival was stopped in a similar way. And a show at the West Berlin Sports Palace was halted by the news. Mayor Willy Brandt of West Berlin asked the people of the city to put candles in their windows tomorrow night in memory of the American president who had so eloquently, and only a few months ago, pledged his affection and allegiance to this city. Mayor Brandt, who is expected to go to the United States for the funeral, said tonight that with the first citizen of the free world, Berlin has lost its best friend. Students from Berlin's Free University tonight will stage a midnight memorial march through the center of West Berlin. They will march on some of the streets traveled by the president when he visited this encircled city in June. The student march will end at the Schöneberg Rathaus, the city hall, where Mr. Kennedy made his famous "I am a Berliner" speech. Tonight, on a cold and rainy night, other West Berliners mourn him. There have been reports in Berlin that the West Berlin police are on the alert for any demonstrations that might take place near the Berlin Wall. The police refuse to confirm this report.
We would like to take you back a bit earlier in the day now and pick up something of the chronology and bring you some of the immediate reaction of those persons who were actually eyewitnesses to the tragedy. The president's motorcade actually had passed, as far as we understand, had passed a thickly populated area where there had been great crowds of people lining the street, and had gotten into a relatively thinly populated area, was moving along at a rather brisk pace along a freeway in Dallas, Texas, heading toward a market area where he was scheduled to make a speech. So there were not, in fact, a great many of people at this line of the motorcade. So each person there could see quite well what happened. And one of those present was a Dallas man who had his 5-year-old son with him, and he was approached by newsmen in Dallas shortly after the shooting and gave an emotional accounting of what he had seen.
Hundreds of persons witnessed the shooting in Dallas just after the noon hour. We have films of eyewitness reports. Coming up is a statement by Charles Brand, who was on the sidewalk and saw the shooting.
Unfortunately, I was probably 15 to 20 feet away from the president when it happened to him.
Tell us exactly what you saw, sir.
He was coming down the street, and my 5-year-old boy and myself were by ourselves on the grass there on Palmer Street, and I asked Joe to wave to him, and Joe waved, and I waved, and the man...
That's all right, sir.
You
go ahead and tell it.
As he was waving back, the shot rang out, and he slumped down in the seat, and his wife reached up toward him, and as he was slumping down, and the second shot went off, and it just knocked him down from the seat.
Two shots?
Two shots.
Did you see the man who did this?
No, sir, I did not see the man who did it. All I did was look in the man's face when he was shot there and saw that expression on his face and grab himself and slide. And the second one, whenever it went, why, I'm positive it had hit him. I hope it didn't, but I'm positive that it hit him, and he went all the way down in the car. Then they speeded up, and I didn't know what was going on, so I just grabbed the boy and fell on him in the hopes that there wasn't a maniac around. I'm sorry. I can't help you more, but I won't forget it.
Bill, we have a few additional details on what took place aboard the Air Force jet was still at the airport in Dallas for the swearing in of President Johnson.